it is something ironic that all the stuff that we can identify as problems with the Australian film industry do not exist by and large in the TV industry, where programs do get pumped and they do get promoted months often before they come to air, which I think is far preferable to what happens now, where things with film appear out of nowhere. I just thought it was extraordinary stuff. It is a film of two halves. The first half is very much like a fever dream or a fever nightmare that this guy goes through. It then does settle into a more conventional crime procedural in the second half. So it has a more conventional template there. It doesn't diminish it. It actually just gives it, I think, some humanity, which replaces the nihilism of the original film. So it does actually make it a bit more human and a bit more relatable. So I did enjoy it very much. I thought it was a searing, compelling descent into alt Australia. What do you think?
I think that's a great way to look at it. When I was approached with the daunting task of adapting Kenneth Cook's amazing novel into a two-part mini, I really had to think, well, not for very long, but I had to think twice. It's an opportunity that was too good to pass up. But one of the things that's marvellous about the book and the 71 film and this new contemporary adaptation is that it is the story of a man out of his element who is, to an extent, an unreliable narrator. He is a city bloke in a really harsh, almost nightmarish, as you say, environment, and he has to change or perish. But that process, where he is undone by the environment, including the strange town he finds himself in, is one where you go, wow, I'm not sure if what I'm seeing is exactly what I'm seeing here. Is there more to this? It was really fun to work from the novel and find all those, deep, dark roots that are in the book and bring them out. And with the extra screen time that we were afforded, having two parts to this, I was able to dig a little bit more deeply into some of the amazing characters that were set up in the book.
What was the process of adaptation like? Did you have a free hand completely in how you were going to develop this, or were you given general guidelines?
I worked closely with the team at Lingo Pictures, as well as with Creed Stenders, who directed it, and with Network 10, to figure out how best to do justice to this story for contemporary viewers. How is it? What are the things that are going to resonate with viewers today about this book more than 50 years ago? And I don't recall any constraints placed upon me. It was really liberating, and I think the thing that we all agreed upon really quickly was that we would be as true as we could to the book, to Kenneth Cook's wonderful novel, and also to set it in the present. And that would allow us to explore how this timeless landscape is still affecting people today.
Would it be fair to say that in the first half of the film, you really do draw upon the book and the film and the nature and the essence of those works, and in the second half, you do kind of go off, that's where you really develop it for the contemporary audience. And in the main, you do, as I said before, you seem to trade the nihilism and the hopelessness for something that's a bit more plot and character driven, that does actually end up in a slightly more human place than the original did.
And hopefully also quite an exciting second half as well.
Oh, there's no question about that. The film does not draw breath.
What was great about the book was that all of that information was kind of latent and there, and with a couple of adjustments, we were able to set off the powder charge and allow this story to expand beyond what was in the book, quite respectfully, I think, and hope. But actually make sure that these stakes for John Grant, the character played by Sean Keenan, that they continue to rise, and to the point where it really does, become a life and death battle for him. He faces the toughest of all choices at the end, and he has to confront his own past and his present problems.
You referred earlier to your limited skill set as a writer, or your skill set being limited to writing. Well, mate, you certainly have the skill of escalation. This is something that you do very well. Do you actually have a big white board in your office? You draw a graph and you keep asking yourself after you write a scene, okay, how can I now raise the stakes even more?
How can I make this worse for the guy? Well, yeah, I do. I'm looking at my whiteboard now, and I do have like a graph. It's all scene cards for the current project. And yeah, of course, stakes have to get higher. Things have to get more problematic for your characters. You have to turn up the wick. It's just this is drama, and sometimes it's slow burn, and sometimes it's quite hot. Pacing is something that I'm beginning to get a handle on as I progress with these fun and fabulous projects, and it's always different. The pacing between long form television and a 2-part miniseries like In Fright and a feature film or a novel, it's all about the balance between letting the viewer or the reader or the audience enjoy a moment and get into a character's head and understand what matters to them, what they care about, and then put them in peril.
In the Yabba that you've created for this series, you seem to be offering a microcosm or a version of Australia that has gone a little off the rails, and that while the characters there say that it's the best place on earth, obviously to a visitor, it's like a little bit of a bizarro version of Australia. You're seeing Australia in a desperate state, kind of hanging on by its fingernails. And I'm taking the cue of the Gary Sweet character, which is a very deeply etched supporting character in the film. You don't normally see supporting characters as well drawn and as three-dimensional as this one is. Even his wife has got these depths to her that you don't normally see in a supporting character. Can you just tell us a bit about the vision you had for the Yabba as a version of Australia and how you approach supporting characters?
London Yabba is a fictional town in Kenneth Cook's book, and it's a mining town, and it's a mining town still in its heyday in the novel. In the miniseries, London Yabba's time as a thriving hub has come and gone. The FIFO workers have largely flown out, and the town is kind of suffering because the attendant mine is pretty much mothballed. And so everyone who's invested in the booming rental properties and so forth is now finding themselves, with properties that are unrentable. There's ironically too much water in town because the infrastructure was built for, many more people to consume it, and no one is. And the characters played by Gary Sweet and Robin Malcolm, who are both just wonderful actors, they were once royalty in the town. They're involved in real estate, but their star is definitely on the descendant, but they're trying to keep up appearances. And that conflict, that inner conflict where they are willing things to get better in the face of reality, makes them it was really fun to write them, and it's really delightful to watch them being played by two such pros.
Now, one of the interesting things in the film is the presence of women. Now, women, of course, want equality, and they certainly deserve it. I'm just wondering whether the equal time that you've given women in this film is something that they would actually want, because it's certainly a wonderful corrective that you've introduced. You've made one of the main characters a woman, and it's not someone who you'd want to meet in a dark alley.
And one of the wonderful things about being a writer and being able to, call yourself working while you're doing so-called research, I was looking into mining communities and the number of, young women as well who would uproot from city life and go out to drive trucks in the mines, work in the mines, etc., etc. It's I think the decisions that have been made for the miniseries are all really true to life and down to earth. But there is a character in there called Mick who is a scary character, and it is delightful to see that the power shift between her character to whom John Grant becomes indebted, and John, played by Sean Keenan. It was a lot of fun to see, again, this suggestion of masculinity and, emasculating in this circumstance, and to watch someone being, shaved down bit by different characters in this world in which John Grant does not belong. It was a lot of fun.
Now, one would have expected in a film that's this heavy for there to be more humour in it. Now, I found it very interesting that the only real humour in the film comes from the copper, whose very dry way of dealing with people kind of leavens some scenes just a little bit. But by and large, mate, you haven't put much humour in this. There's no real comedy relief in this film. It was obviously deliberate that you did that. How come?
It's a difficult thing to make light of life and death circumstances all the time. You can certainly do it, but it comes with at a risk. I think there are certainly moments of wry humour in Waking Fright that I really enjoy, and they're subtle, and they come from marvellous performances by people like David Wenham. But I don't think it's something that needs to be funny to be entertaining. I think that there is enough going on with characters who are in circumstances that look like they're one thing on the outside, but when you dig a bit deeper, there's more to it. And I felt that there was no need to over-egg the custard and put in stuff in the hope that it's going to satisfy more and more people. I think that there's enough in there, in the base material, of course, as well, Kenneth Cook's wonderful book, that it can stand by itself without gilding the lily too much.
You have replaced roo shooting with pig shooting. Was there a particular reason for that?
I think the contemporising of the piece allowed us a lot of different choices. And I think that, feral animals is something that we've become more and more aware of over the last 2 or 3 decades. And it's certainly still something that's prevalent, the further we get from cities. And it made perfect sense. Why not?
Now, booze and gambling were a huge part of the first film. One looks at what you guys have done with this film, and it almost seems as though there was no need to change the emphasis of those 2 particular sins of the Australian character. It almost seems unfortunate that there was no need to mollify that. Drinking and gambling remain 2 huge problems in Australia. I'm just keen to know, mate, when you were writing it, did you feel that isn't it a pity that I can't touch these aspects of the story, or there's no need to, because it's as bad now, if not worse, as it was 40 years ago?
I think this is one of the things about human nature and the sense of wanting to escape the inescapable. We always surround ourselves with these things that can become peccadillos, like gambling and drinking too much, in order to deliberately blind ourselves to tricky circumstances. And I think, in the book, booze and two-up are such strong, iconic themes that run deeply all the way through the work. You couldn't unpick that without unpicking, the essential cloth of the piece. So they didn't change. We did explore that the poker machines have come and gone, in Bundanyabba, which is why we still have tour. And we do add to the problem of drinking too much by suggesting that there are other drug problems as well in the town. And we know that they are certainly real problems in lots of rural communities today. So I think, we're quite respectful to, those important themes of the book, and we just added a few more interesting layers.
Can you just tell me quickly the research that you did? Did you go on a research journey? How much time did you allot to researching this?
The most important research I could do for this was to go back and read and reread and re-reread Kenneth Cook's novel. I didn't watch the film Adaptation as part of doing this. I really wanted to try and find what was working for me in the book that could still work for Australian TV audiences today. And once those important decisions were made, that it was going to be still the Yabba, and we are going to set it in the present, and we are going to keep as much of the book as we can. The rest of it came remarkably easy, and the wonderful thing about the internet is that you don't have to travel far to find the facts that you need. But this isn't really about facts, this is about people. And I have in previous jobs and through my life done a bit of travel around Australia, and I think drawing on those experiences and characters that one meets outside the cities, it certainly helped enrich the writing of the miniseries. It was a lot of fun. It was a privilege.
Kriv Stenders certainly outdoes himself with the direction in this film. How much of the style that we see on the screen is there on the page to begin with? Are you writing a lot of that stuff about the way characters move in and out of shadows, the way focus is used? Do you putting all that on the page, or is a lot of that coming directly from Kriv Stenders?
Writing a screenplay or a teleplay it's a bit of a dark art in that you have to suggest to all of the talents who will pick up the page what your intentions are, including cinematography, the blocking of characters within scenes, obviously the dialogue, but predominantly the mood and the tone. And I think and hope that was on the page and was able to work as a solid blueprint for Kriv and Jeff Hall to work with to really hammer home the landscape that's such an important part of Wake in Fright. This sense of big skies and heat counterpointed by small dark places and a lack of surety, this uneasiness and this delicate dance that the character John Grant has to do to try and get what he wants to get out of this place. I hope that that's all on the page, and I think it was to an extent, because I was just delighted that Kriv picked it up and ran with it. He did a marvellous job.
Kudos to your attention to detail for explaining such things as, why are they playing two up? Why doesn't he use his mobile? All the little details you've taken care of in this. Do you have a process of just squeezing the air bubbles out of the story to make sure everything is explained, and that there's no point where people will look at it and go, hang on, how come he's not doing this? How come he's not doing that?
It's difficult because you don't want to use up too much real estate or airtime explaining what should be, something that the viewer can just, take in and enjoy. When you've got marvellous characters played by David Wenham and Sean Keenan, you can give them these little bits of dialogue that help explain the circumstance, and they just make it sound so natural that it just becomes not a problem. And, I think that
I think you're referring there to another one of your skills as a writer, and that's the invaluable asset of invisible exposition.
It's tricky, isn't it? And it's one of those difficult things to try and give something to the audience without, sounding like you're mansplaining, to actually bury it in the narrative and make it feel